Last time, we told the story of a merchant prince who built a private army in the swamps of the Western Delta and made Britain send almost its entire West African navy just to bring him down. This time, we are moving east into the creeks of Nimbe Brass, and we are meeting a very different kind of resistance. Not a fortress built years in advance, not a calculated escape through hidden waterways. This is the story of a king who ran out of patience, gambled everything on a single dawn raid, and paid for it with his kingdom, his throne, and finally his life. This is the story of King Koko of Nembe, Christian school teacher, a renegade king, the man who led the largest African assault on British commercial power the Niger Delta had ever seen. To understand Koko, you have to understand Nembe, a confederation of Ijaw trading towns in Eastern Delta, built entirely on one function: controlling the movement of palm oil from the interior market to the coast and manufactured goods from the coast back inland. No farmland to speak of, no mineral wealth, just the river and the right to move freely on it. That was Nembe's entire economy, and it had worked for generations. Frederick William Koko wasn't born into the system as an obvious future king. He started out as a Christian school teacher, literate, mission educated, comfortable in the world the Europeans were building on the coast. When King Okia died in 1889, it was precisely that Christian identity that got him chosen as successor. The chiefs who picked him hoped a Christian king would keep the peace. For 5 years, an older co-ruler named Ebiva kept him in check. Then in 1894, Ebiva died. While Koko was settling into the throne, something else was tightening around Nimbe's neck. In 1886, the British Crown had handed a private company, the Royal Niger Company, a charter giving it monopoly control over trade on the Niger and its tributaries. Nimbe had never signed away its rights. Didn't matter. The company enforced its monopoly anyway. Company agents seized Nimbe canoes, blocked Nimbe traders from markets they had used for generations. By the early 1890s, a kingdom that lived entirely by trade was being slowly strangled by a business decision made in London. The British Consul General himself, Sir Claude MacDonald, later admitted it. He described Coco's grievances as complaints he had had the unpleasant duty to listen to for the last 3.5 years without being able to gain for them any redress. 3.5 years of formal complaints, zero results. With Ebifa gone and the company showing no sign of backing off, Coco did something drastic. He renounced Christianity, the faith of the very power strangling his kingdom's trade, and returned to Nembe's traditional religion. It wasn't a spiritual crisis, it was a declaration. Then he built a coalition, Boni, Okpoma, the Nembe towns of Ogbolomabiri, Pasambiri, and Tombras, communities that might just as easily have been rivals, now drawn together by one shared grievance. In January 1895, the chiefs sat down together and made a decision. They were going to war. Before dawn on January 29, 1895, 22 war canoes carrying more than 1,000 armed men moved silently through the creeks towards Akassa, the Royal Niger Company's headquarters at the mouth of the Niger. It was fast, and it was overwhelming. Warehouses burned, offices gutted, machinery destroyed, around 70 company workers captured, roughly 25 people killed in the fighting, 32 Europeans taken hostage, along with cannons, a machine gun, and whatever else could be carried home as plunder. It was the largest coordinated African assault on British commercial power the Niger Delta had ever witnessed. Koko moved fast to turn it into leverage. 2 days later, he wrote directly to the British Consul General. His fight was with the company, not the crown. Released his hostages in exchange for free trade restored. The British said no. What happened next is the part of this story that dominates every colonial era account, and is the part that turned a trade dispute into what the British would call an atrocity. The day after the raid, more than 40 of the hostages, a number later fixed at 43 by official inquiry, were killed at a site that became known as Sacrifice Island. A handful of Christian chiefs intervened and managed to save roughly 28 prisoners. But for the British public, Sacrifice Island became the entire story. Years of block trade and unanswered grievance simply disappeared from the narrative. All was left was an atrocity that demanded punishment. On February 28, 1895, the Royal Navy answered. Warships under Rear Admiral Sir Frederick Bedford tore into Nembe's capital, razing it and killing an estimated 300 people. Smallpox, introduced during the campaign by multiple accounts, spread through a population already shattered by the assault. Koko escaped capture. His war canoe didn't. 16 of them were towed away in surrender. A fine was paid, weapons were returned, prisoners were exchanged. On paper, the crisis was over. But something unexpected happened back in Britain. Public opinion turned not against Koko, but against the Royal Niger Company and its director, blamed for provoking the whole affair through years of commercial abuse. The Colonial Office sent the explorer, Sir John Kirk, to investigate. Kirk's 1896 report confirmed the death at Sacrifice Island and confirmed Nembe's underlying grievances were real. Koko was offered a settlement. He judged the terms inadequate and refused to meet the British officials to finalize anything. In April 1896, Britain deposed him, declared him an outlaw, put a £200 bounty on his head. For 2 more years, Koko lived as a fugitive in the very delta he had once ruled, moving between hideouts in the creeks. In 1898, in a remote village called Etiema, he died. He suspected suicide at roughly 45 years old. The following year, under the weight of the scandals his rebellion had helped exposed, the Royal Niger Company's charter was revoked. Its territories were sold to the British government, the beginning of what became the Southern Nigeria Protectorate. Today, Nembe marks January 29th as Nembe National Day. The graves of the European killed in the reprisal still stand in Tuambras, remembered locally as the white man's graveyard. And in the Niger Delta's long modern argument over who controls its oil wealth, Koko is often named as the very first voice, a king who fought a century early over the terms of a resource trade that would come to define the whole region. He isn't remembered the way the British record first wrote him. The record called him a renegade, a footnote to a punitive naval expedition. Nembe remembers something else, a king who chose defense when desperation offered no other door. Nana of Ishekiri made the British work for years and pay a fortune to take his fortress apart. And then he came home and lived out his life in peace. Koko's story doesn't end that way. He gambled his entire kingdom on a single raid, and he lost his throne, his home, and eventually his life alone in exile. Two different Delta rulers, two completely different endings, same empire, same impossible choice: bend or fight and risk losing everything. Koko fought, and the cost of that fight is the story we just told. Thank you for watching the video. We really hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Thank you.